The ice cubes in the glass clinked with a strange, hollow sound. The amber liquid that had been pushed toward me was laced with an unknown powder, its sole purpose to destroy my life. The young woman who slid the glass over with a welcoming smile, and my husband who pretended not to notice a thing. To them, in this moment, I was probably nothing more than a boring, middle-aged woman and a frustrating obstacle. But they knew absolutely nothing yet. They had no idea that after this, they would come crashing down to the very bottom of the hell they had prepared for themselves. Catherine, your cooking tonight was absolutely magnificent. I'm so impressed, but you seem so tired. I suppose at your age, just keeping up with the house is a heavy burden on the body. At the dining table in my own home, without the slightest hint of guilt, these words slipped from Alyssa's lips. She was a junior executive under my husband, Bob. She turned 28 this year, and her entire body radiated youth and overconfidence. She had been invited to our home under the pretext of celebrating my husband's successful project, but she acted as if she were the lady of the house. Hey, don't say that. Kathy was quite the beauty in her youth, too. Well, even though now she has certainly turned into a textbook housewife, Bob said, mockingly scolding Alyssa. My 50-year-old husband laughed with a relaxed smile on his face. Looking at his careless grin, I could only take a deep breath, stay silent, and offer a faint smile in return. I used to think silence was golden. I implicitly believed that the noble duty of a wife was not to cause trouble, to always support her husband, and to work behind the scenes to protect the integrity of the family. But now I clearly understood that silence in front of people devoid of empathy is merely bait that makes them even more arrogant. Human beings are creatures capable of becoming incredibly cruel when they know their opponent won't strike back. Seeing that I didn't answer, Alyssa looked at me with a gaze that increasingly read of triumph. I'm sorry, I sometimes just say what I'm thinking, but a life like yours, Catherine, where you just wait at home every day for your husband to get back from work, seems so peaceful. I'm actually jealous. I, on the other hand, am consumed every day by a challenging career, so I don't even have time to rest. The sharp thorns hidden behind her words pierced me. She was degrading me as a worthless person, simultaneously taking pride in the fact that she was spending intimate time with my husband under the guise of work. I stood up from my chair. I'm glad you enjoyed the meal. I'll go get us some more drinks, I said, and headed to the kitchen. Opening the drawer of the kitchen cabinet, I took a deep breath. I had known about their affair for months. A different perfume scent, strange text messages in the middle of the night, ridiculous excuses to leave the house on weekends. The tiny crack that had formed between an aging married couple had gradually turned into an impassable abyss. At first, I thought about confronting my husband for an honest conversation. But causing a scandal without hard evidence would only mean they would get smarter about hiding it and start tormenting me psychologically. Therefore, I chose to pretend I knew nothing and let them swim freely. Suddenly, my attention was drawn to the reflection in the mirror hanging on the kitchen wall. From there, the dining table was slightly visible. When Bob got up to go to the restroom, Alyssa's movements became very fast and strange. She pulled something out of her small purse and then reached her hand over my glass. Through the mirror, I saw white powder falling into my drink. A chill ran down my spine. What was it? Sleeping pills? Or something more sinister? Actually, before she arrived at our house today, I accidentally overheard her phone conversation with someone outside the front gate. Yes, I got the drugs. If we use this, that woman will definitely lose her mind and embarrass herself in front of Bob. That way we can immediately declare her legally incompetent and take everything. Those words echoed in my head again. Exactly. She wanted me to drink it, lose my mind in front of my husband, and act like a lunatic. An incredibly devious and cruel trap to create the image of an unstable wife, cause my husband to feel utter disgust, and kill whatever was left of his feelings for me. When someone plans to destroy another person, they often don't realize that the ground beneath their own feet is the most fragile. People blinded by passion often fall into the trap of the unfounded assumption that their opponent thinks and acts the same way. I arranged some fresh appetizers on a plate, took a deep breath, and returned to the dining room. Alyssa sat there with an innocent face, and my glass was in the exact same position as before. Bob, having just returned from the restroom, also sat down and looked pleased. Oh, are you having another drink? Of course, tonight is a special evening. Alyssa is keeping us company too, right? In a calm voice, I pretended to clear the table, leaning forward slightly. Oh my goodness, Alyssa, you have sauce on your blouse. Really? Where? Alyssa panicked and looked down at her chest. Bob also turned his head to look. In that short, split-second pause, without the slightest hesitation, I swapped my glass with Alyssa's. The design of the glass, the color of the liquid, the number of ice cubes, everything was absolutely identical. No one noticed a thing. I'm sorry. I guess I imagined it. It must have just been a trick of the light. When I sat back down, Alyssa gave a cynical and slightly irritated laugh. Don't scare me like that, Catherine. Well then, let's drink once more to our shared future. As I raised my glass, Alyssa's eyes flashed strangely for a moment. She looked at the glass in my hand and then, with relief, picked up her own. Yes, exactly. To Catherine's new future, Alyssa said with thick sarcasm, and drank half the glass containing the drug. The unsuspecting Bob also drank his beverage next to her. I only smiled slightly. What she had just drank was the poison prepared for my destruction. When the creator of the poison swallows it themselves, what a tragedy unfolds. My husband, who would witness an unexpected spectacle right before his eyes, would soon realize the stupidity of his mistress and the sheer depth of his own sin. The ticking of the wall clock sounded increasingly loud in the silence of the night. The silent countdown to hell had already begun. Just 10 minutes after she drained her glass, Alyssa's behavior began to seem strange to everyone. She cleared her throat. Is the AC not working right? She kept touching her neck. Her breathing became short and heavy, even though the room temperature was kept at a comfortable level. Sweat began to cover her forehead, and her face turned unnaturally red. Her unfocused eyes grew heavy, and her sensual sighs could be heard in the dining room. The woman who, just a few minutes ago, had used her youth and beauty as a weapon to humiliate me with a sly smile, was now twisting in different directions, as if consumed by a severe fever. The drug she had prepared to trap me must have been a cheap narcotic with a very strong and fast effect. Now she was experiencing the horror of the trap she had set herself. Hey, did you have too much to drink? Bob set down his glass and asked in a relaxed tone, completely unaware of what was happening. I'm so hot, Bob. Alyssa looked at my husband with damp eyes and then suddenly unbuttoned the first button of her blouse. Her cleavage was widely exposed, and the sweet scent of her perfume, mixed with the smell of alcohol, filled the room. Wait, what are you doing? We're right in front of Kathy. Realizing the abnormality of the situation, Bob panicked and jumped up to grab Alyssa's arm, trying to stop her. But Alyssa, whose common sense had been destroyed by the drug, no longer understood her boss's reprimands. She staggered, stood up, and then unexpectedly wrapped her arms around Bob's neck and pressed her face against his chest. What's the big deal? That old lady won't understand anything anyway. Alyssa laughed with a slurred tongue, pointed at me, and sneered. You always said it yourself, Bob, remember? My young body is so much better than this wrinkled woman's. You said you suffocate at home. You want to hurry up and lock her in a psych ward and take her assets, right? Yes, hug me right now. The air in the dining room instantly froze. Bob's face turned deathly pale. He turned to me as if he had seen a ghost. A full confession that could no longer be denied. Moreover, these decisive words had slipped from his own mistress's lips right in front of me. I didn't object, and I didn't panic. I simply and calmly placed the cup of hot tea I was holding onto the table and looked at the two of them. The terrified face of my husband, desperately trying to push his mistress away. Looking at him, I suddenly realized this man didn't even have the courage to betray me openly. He was just a pathetic coward, a miserable loser who only wanted to have fun with young women on the side while maintaining his comfort zone. A cozy family. As soon as the truth was revealed to his wife, instead of protecting his mistress, he panicked, trying to save his own skin. The sight was truly disgusting. Stop it, Alyssa, you've gone crazy. Let go. Bob desperately tried to tear Alyssa away from him, but Alyssa, consumed by unnatural passion due to the drug, continued to hold him tightly. In their struggle, they crashed into the table. A small plate fell to the floor and shattered with a loud clatter. Our family dining room, which I had kept in peace and quiet for so long, turned into a scene of madness and lust in a matter of minutes. I slowly stood up and asked my husband in a very cold voice, Bob, your junior executive seems full of enthusiasm. Do you always conduct these kinds of training sessions at the office? No, Kathy. This is a misunderstanding. She's just drunk and talking nonsense. Cold sweat poured down my husband's forehead as he frantically searched for an excuse. His voice trembled, his eyes darted around, and his attempts to deflect looked pathetic. At that moment, Alyssa, whose desire had been rudely rejected, suddenly exploded with anger. Why? Why are you pretending to be a good husband? I'll tell her everything. She staggered, grabbed her purse, and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers, she tried to unlock the screen. Stop it. What are you going to do? Bob tried to snatch the phone, but Alyssa roughly pushed him away. Catherine, look at this. He and I have been together for a long time. When Alyssa threw the phone onto the table to show it to me, the lock screen lit up brightly. Exactly at that moment, a message notification popped up on the screen. The sender's name was Jared, and it clearly read, Did you give the drugs to that old hag yet? That idiot's accounts and trust funds are ready to be drained. Once you're done, hurry up and get over here. Alyssa's movement stopped completely. Bob's eyes, as he also peered at the screen, widened to their limits. As if forgetting how to breathe, his body literally froze. My husband probably thought he could conquer this woman with his charm and status, but in reality, he was the biggest fool of all. He had been ruthlessly deceived, used merely as a source of money. A very tragic end for a fool who was too confident in his own value. In the middle of the silenced room, I held back a cold laugh that rose from the depths of my soul. The lid of the hellish cauldron was now fully open. Before the text displayed on the screen, Bob froze like a statue. After a few seconds of oppressive silence, an animalistic roar echoed through the dining room. You tricked me? Bob leaped across the table and grabbed Alyssa by the shoulders, fiercely shaking her while she was still in a drug-induced daze. No, Jared is just a friend. Don't joke like that. The old lady's assets. What does all this mean? Didn't you say you wanted to marry me? Two people who had just been flaunting their intimacy and humiliating me were now looking at each other with bloodshot eyes, spitting out vile insults. I stepped around the shards of the broken plate on the floor and took a sip of my now completely cold tea. When a person is backed into a corner, they don't reflect on their sins. They look for a scapegoat to save themselves. A quiet despair spread through my chest, seeing how low the man had fallen who once loved me and swore to protect me for life. At the same time, I felt relief. I no longer needed to sacrifice the rest of my life for such an ungrateful person. You were hunting for my money? I'm calling the cops right now. When Bob tried to get his phone with trembling hands, a piercing doorbell rang out, shattering the night's silence. The movements of Bob and Alyssa stopped completely. Who could be coming so late at night? No. Given the current situation, only one person could have arrived. Don't open it. I'm begging you, don't open it, Alyssa pleaded with a pale face. But the person outside didn't seem inclined to wait. The sound of the front door opening confidently could be heard. Alyssa must have left it unlocked beforehand so her accomplice could get in. Hey, how much longer? Did you drug that old lady yet? With heavy steps, a scruffy-looking young blonde man appeared in the dining room. Several earrings gleamed in his ears, and his smile was full of mockery. There could be no mistake. This was Jared, whose name had flashed on the phone screen. He looked in turn at the chaos in the room, at Alyssa lying on the floor because of the drug, and at the deathly pale Bob, and then exaggeratedly clicked his tongue. You failed, huh? Absolutely useless woman. You, Jared. You were after my money. Get out of here. I'm calling the cops. Bob flew into a rage and tried to lunge at Jared. But a 50-year-old man who only sat at a desk every day was no match in physical strength for a young guy accustomed to violence. Jared laughed cynically, easily twisted Bob's arm behind his back, and threw him to the floor. Ouch, let go, I'm a senior director. Keep quiet, old man. Senior director or whatever, I don't care. Your position right now is pretty pathetic too. We have a ton of proof of your affairs, from photos of you going in and out of hotels to all your disgusting text messages. Hearing Jared's words, Bob stopped resisting. For my husband, who put social status and public image above all else, the revelation of his infidelity and a report to corporate management meant social death. Jared looked down at Bob, sprawled on the floor, and proposed a sinister plan. Hey, old man, how about we work together? It's not too late to make a deal. Exactly. We'll force this old witch to finish the rest of the drugs, and then we'll record a video of her going crazy. You can use that video to say your wife is insane, lock her away in a psych ward, and easily get all the rights to her assets. We'll take a little hush money and disappear. You won't get fired from your company and we get paid. A perfect solution for everyone, isn't it? For a moment, the air in the room froze. To cooperate with a scammer who tried to con him, just to baselessly throw his wife, who had been by his side for years, into hell. A normal person would never agree to such an insane proposal. I quietly looked into Bob's eyes, trying to see if he had any last remnants of conscience left as a husband, or at least as a human being. But when he noticed my cold gaze, he quickly looked away. This is all your fault, Kathy, my husband said in a trembling voice, uttering unimaginable words. If you had just understood my feelings sooner and quietly stepped aside, none of this would have happened. This is all your fault for being so insensitive. To save himself, he was selling his wife without a second thought. The man who had once built a warm family was now completely consumed by madness due to fear and greed. Excellent, old man. You catch on quick. Jared smiled with satisfaction and pulled a new packet of powder out of his bag. I remained silent. I didn't utter a word. I didn't cry out of fear. I didn't beg for mercy. I was merely etching into my memory the image of these fools falling deeper and deeper. An absolute coldness, surpassing anger, now completely took over my heart. Come on, lady, open your mouth nicely. You don't want this to hurt, right? Jared approached while Bob stood up, blocking my escape route. Alyssa, lying on the floor from the drug's effects, looked at us with an empty gaze and giggled strangely. The dark shadows of both men completely covered me. There was no way out. I couldn't possibly defeat their physical strength. A deadly trap was slowly tightening around my neck. Violence and madness were trying to destroy my daily life. But they had not yet realized how calmly and how thoroughly I had been waiting for this exact moment. Hurry up and open up. I guess this'll be a little rough for an old lady like you. Tsk. Jared's rough hand reached out to forcibly grab my chin. Behind him, the husband I had lived with for so many years, Bob, simply stood silently with a strained smile. His wife was being threatened right in front of his eyes, but what flew from his lips were not words of care, but selfish curses soaked in greed. Drink it quickly, you washed-up woman. I've been feeding you all this time. At least serve some purpose now for my freedom. They probably expected me to cry out of fear and beg for mercy. But I didn't resist, and I didn't even make a sound. I just looked at both of them with a gaze as cold as ice. My strange silence made Jared hesitate for a second and stop his movements. The memories of love and the years we spent together turned out to be worth less than a scrap of paper in the face of betrayal. The mouth that once swore eternal love to me was now insulting me as if I were useless garbage. The true nature of a person is revealed not in peaceful times, but on the edge of the deepest abyss of despair, disgusting and pathetic. You stubborn old witch, I'm going to end this fast. Jared, who could no longer hide his irritation, stepped forward to forcibly shove the packet of narcotics into my mouth. It was exactly at that moment that I pulled out a small black remote I had been hiding in my apron pocket and pressed it without hesitation. A piercing electronic sound echoed through the room, and a moment later, the television monitor mounted on the dining room wall suddenly lit up brightly. Then, an emotionless synthesized voice shattered the night silence. Emergency security system activated. From this moment on, video and audio recordings from the premises will be transmitted in real time to the partnered security company and to predetermined external servers. Hearing this voice, Jared and Bob flinched and turned toward the monitor. It clearly displayed a color image of themselves, surrounding me and trying to force me to drink the drug. Mini cameras had been expertly hidden in the four corners of the room, among the decorative plants and in the crevices of the bookshelves. What the hell? Hey, you didn't mention this. Jared panicked and jumped away from me, looking around for blind spots. Kathy, what have you done? Bob, deathly pale, pointed at the monitor with a trembling finger. External servers? Do you want to destroy me? Do you have any idea what will happen if this video gets to the company? Setting aside his own sins, my husband was still worrying about his position and public image. What a pathetic sight. A person devoid of self-respect is more fragile and pathetic than someone clinging to a false status that must be protected. I calmly watched their panic as if I were watching events unfold in another world. We can destroy the evidence if we break the equipment. A crazed Jared picked up a nearby dining chair and hurled it with all his might at the monitor on the wall. A loud crashing sound rang out, the monitor screen shattered, and the image vanished. Jared breathed heavily and then laughed wildly and victoriously. That's that. But I didn't flinch. Only a cold smile touched my lips. Even though the screen is broken, the data is already being continuously transmitted outside. I cast a glance at the remains of the shattered monitor and slowly said, "The conversation you just had was recorded perfectly clearly. Your own horrifying confession about forcing a wife to take drugs and recording her losing her mind for everyone to see. You knew everything from the very beginning and set a trap." Bob collapsed to the floor, clutched his head, and groaned. He finally realized that this whole time they had been played like fools. However, the reaction of the young and reckless Jared was different. The fact that the police and security were coming only provoked his hidden cruelty. "Since I'm going to jail anyway, I'm not leaving empty-handed. You damn old witch. At the very least, I'm taking you to the grave with me." Jared pulled a gleaming silver switchblade from his pocket and lunged straight at me. There was no room left for logic. The distance was too close, no time to run. The sharp blade was approaching my chest, but there was not a drop of fear on my face, because my real trump card was not the cameras or the security system against some street thug. The kitchen door at the far end of the dining room quietly opened, and a heavy, calm male voice rang out. As a surprise, Jared halted his movement. The figure of a large man silently appeared behind him and, with a swift motion, locked the arm holding the knife in a painful submission hold. "Ah, it hurts. You're going to break it? You're going to break it?" The knife fell to the floor with a loud clatter. The man who easily neutralized Jared was dressed in a black suit and had a piercing gaze. He looked to be about 55 years old. "Who are you? Why are you in the house?" Bob screamed in a trembling voice, still sitting helplessly on the floor. I slowly stood up, adjusted my slightly ruffled clothes, and gave a small nod to the man in the suit. Let me introduce you, Bob. This is Sam, the private investigator I hired a month ago. He's been waiting in that kitchen since long before you arrived. Holding Jared down, Sam looked coldly at Bob. From gathering evidence of Mr. Bob's infidelities to running background checks on this man here. Everything is already completed. Jared, do you even understand who you were trying to con? Hearing Sam's words, Jared answered with a curse, fighting through the pain. What do boomers like you even know? This sugar daddy is just a source of cash, that's all. You might have thought you were acting on behalf of the woman named Alyssa, but the real puppet master pulling the strings behind your back is a relative of the very woman you just tried to stab. Bob and Jared fell silent, not understanding the meaning of these words. Only Alyssa, who was beginning to lose consciousness from the drug, muttered quietly in a delirium. I sighed softly and looked at the knife lying at my feet. How could an ordinary housewife set such a complex trap? They had missed one most crucial detail. The fact that my family background is a very terrifying entity that one should never make an enemy of. This situation was about to plunge into a much deeper darkness than they could ever imagine. Catherine's relative? Bob's hoarse voice echoed hollowly through the wrecked dining room. Jared, who was still pinned to the floor, also blinked in confusion, trying to process Sam's words through the pain. It was entirely natural that Bob was confused. He and I met 20 years ago at a regular job, fell in love, and got married. Back then, I told him I had no relatives and that I was completely on my own. In fact, not a single relative of mine attended our wedding. That was exactly why Bob underestimated me, considering me a lonely and pathetic woman who couldn't live without him, and thought he could control me however he pleased. But the reality was completely different. Bob, 3 years ago you were promoted to your current position as marketing director at a very young age. Did you really think that was solely because of your own abilities? When I asked this calmly, Bob's shoulders flinched slightly. What do you mean? I was promoted for my merits. Mr. Bob, do you know the name of the corporation that is the main shareholder and largest business partner of your workplace? Apex Solutions, Sam interrupted in a cold voice, revealing the facts. Vance Horizon Holdings. But what does that have to do with anything? Mrs. Catherine's maiden name is Catherine Vance, the eldest daughter of Nicholas Vance, chairman of the board of directors of Vance Horizon Holdings. That is the true identity of the wife you thought was entirely worthless all this time. In the blink of an eye, all the blood seemed to drain from Bob's face. His eyes widened, his mouth opened and closed like a goldfish, but he made no sound. The social status and income that my husband was so proud of, the man who despised me, was actually built entirely on the foundation of the family I supposedly left behind. The bitter reality was that he, who felt like the breadwinner for his wife, was actually the most helpless, pathetic little bird kept in a giant cage called his wife's clan. 20 years ago, I fell in love with his straightforwardness and dedication to his work, even though he had neither status nor a big name. To escape an arranged marriage, I gave up my name and status, choosing simple happiness with him. However, it seems the creature called man, if given imaginary power that he mistakenly takes for his own ability, rots to such a degree of disgust. No, it can't be. The daughter of the Vance family? But you always cared about clipping coupons and we lived paycheck to paycheck just on my salary. Bob crawled on the floor, desperately shaking his head in disbelief. That's right. I wanted to build an ordinary family with you, so I refused any help from my father and tried to live solely on your income. But my father secretly supported you from behind the scenes, so that his beloved daughter's husband wouldn't be looked down upon in the company. Realizing this fact, Bob's eyes filled with despair and terror unlike anything seen before. The fact that he brought a mistress into the house and tried to drug his wife. If this reached the ears of the chairman of Vance Horizon Holdings, he wouldn't just be fired. He would be socially annihilated. The one who had been protected all this time was not me, but him. Suddenly, Jared, who was pinned under Sam, shouted, "The person who hired me wasn't from some huge company. That guy used the alias X online. He was the one who told me to take fake photos of this old witch cheating and expose her as crazy. The IP address and the funding source of the X account have already been traced by us. And here is the result." Sam, holding Jared down with one hand, pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the floor. The photograph showed a young man around 35 years old, dressed in an expensive suit and smiling arrogantly. "Derek," I muttered. Sam nodded deeply. Derek Vance, the 35-year-old son of Mr. Vance from his second wife. To me, he was my half-brother, a cold man who was always ambitious and thought only about how to monopolize the family's power. Right after Mr. Vance changed his will and decided to leave the majority of his assets and shares to his eldest blood daughter, Mrs. Catherine, Derek started acting suspiciously. Hearing Sam's explanation, all the dots began to connect. Derek was afraid I would return to the Vance family and threaten his position. So he ran a background check on my husband Bob and discovered the existence of a woman named Alyssa. Then he secretly hired thugs like Jared with cash, incited Alyssa to poison me, and planned to destroy me socially. I was just used. I was tricked. Jared screamed in despair. The cruelty with which he had just been swinging the knife vanished. Now he was just a petty coward, trembling in terror before a power far exceeding his own. Kathy, me too. I didn't know anything. Bob crawled closer, trying to reach out to me. I was just seduced. And as for that drug, they did it all themselves. I'm begging you, Kathy, don't leave me. Don't tell your father. The mouth that a few minutes ago insulted me as if I were garbage was now desperately begging for forgiveness. To save himself, he easily sacrificed the mistress he had just been loving and the accomplices he had conspired with. Looking at his incredibly vile and malicious behavior, I even felt a drop of pity. Feelings like self-respect or sadness had long since dried up. All that remained was a cold determination to clean up this filth. Don't touch me. As I took a step back and coldly uttered those words, my phone, lying on the table, buzzed quietly. Seeing the caller's name on the screen, I narrowed my eyes slightly. Derek Vance must be calling to check on the situation. He was impatient because there had been no report of success from Jared, so he called my phone directly. Bob and Jared stared at the screen, holding their breath. I slowly pressed the answer button and turned on the speakerphone. Hello, Sister Kathy. Sorry to bother you so late. Actually, I'm driving to your house right now. The voice of my half-brother came from the speaker, seemingly concerned but with clearly hidden mockery. I got word from Bob that you're acting strange. Well, have you gone completely crazy yet? Hearing that voice, Bob let out a short cry and covered his face with his hands. The horror that his betrayal was, it turns out, known and planned from the very beginning by his brother-in-law. I held the phone and slightly raised the corners of my lips. Yes, Derek, gone crazy, I answered clearly in an icy voice. But I'm not the one who went crazy, and I'll never let things go the way you want them to. On the other end of the line, Derek could be heard catching his breath. This was exactly where the real counterattack began. The cheap soap opera was over. An all-out, ruthless war against the relative who wanted to take everything from me had just begun. Just a few minutes after the phone call ended, the roar of a luxury car's engine shattered the night's silence and stopped in front of our house. The sound of a car door opening and closing roughly was heard, followed by the sound of the front door unlocking. The door that Alyssa had left open for Jared was now inviting the main puppet master, whom no one had called. Hello, Sister Kathy. Looks like you have a mess in here. Without taking off his shoes, my half-brother Derek entered the dining room in an expensive, custom-tailored suit. The man in his early 30s narrowed his ambition-filled eyes and slowly surveyed the chaos in the room. Alyssa, lying unconscious on the floor. Jared, groaning under Sam's grip. And my husband Bob, deathly pale and trembling. Although he frowned for a moment upon not finding his insane and pathetic sister as he had imagined, Derek quickly smirked. Apparently, such a cheap drug isn't enough to drive my sister with Vance blood crazy. My mistake for getting involved with a street thug like Jared. Your cowardly nature of not getting your own hands dirty and destroying people on the sly hasn't changed a bit since the old days. Yes, I said calmly. Derek laughed cynically and pulled several folded documents from his inner pocket. Cowardly? It's called being a smart sister. Ever since Dad started getting dementia and said he would leave all the wealth and power of the family to his eldest blood daughter, I prepared every possible avenue. Derek threw the documents onto the table. Their contents were simply unthinkable. A medical report in my name confirming early-onset dementia and severe acute paranoia with the signature and stamp of a famous psychiatrist, as well as a fake PI's report showing me going in and out of a hotel with a young man. Tomorrow, along with the news of Dad's coma, these documents will be sent out to the entire board of directors of Vance Horizon Holdings and to the editorial offices of the tabloids. The story will be this. The eldest daughter of the Vance family suffers from early-onset dementia and is cheating on her husband with a young guy. All her claims to the inheritance are merely delusions caused by illness. Derek's words made the air in the room even colder. The drug trap using Jared was merely a quick way to easily send me to a psych ward. But even if that failed, he had already prepared a fake scenario backed by power and money to destroy me socially. This is the violence used by those in power. The small truth of one person will be crushed like scrap paper in the face of lies and giant authority. I quietly looked at the documents. Not with anger, but rather a slight admiration for the twisted obsession of my half-brother, who was so afraid of me that he prepared such a flawless plan. There was another person here who felt the absolute nature of these power dynamics. Bob, crawling on the floor, looked pleadingly at Derek. Derek, I'll cooperate. I'll confirm that Kathy has been acting strange lately, that she had an affair with a young guy. So please, I beg you, don't take away my position at the company. Don't take away my spot as marketing director at Apex Solutions. The man who a few minutes ago was crying and begging me had easily switched to the side of the one who was about to destroy me. The person I once loved, as it turned out, was ready to fall to his knees before anyone stronger than him. Is human dignity so easily destroyed just to protect one's ego and job title? Looking at his repulsive figure, my emotions finally died. I only looked down at him like a cold statue of ice. I understood perfectly well that no matter how much I spoke, the truth would never reach a man who has no principles. Look at this. What an excellent husband you chose. It's like watching a bad comedy. Derek looked down at Bob, burst out laughing, and then snapped his fingers loudly. At this signal, two large men walked through the door. They had earpieces in their ears and stared with blank expressions. Professional bodyguards. You said your name is Sam. Do you really think you can stop my men alone? Derek's cold voice rang out. Sam, still holding Jared's joint in a lock, stared intently at the men with a tense expression. The balance of physical power had completely shifted. Sister, the game is over. You are sick. You better focus on lifelong treatment in a special facility isolated from the outside world. You might not be able to attend the reading of Dad's will, but don't worry, I'll manage the inheritance well. The bodyguard silently, slowly approached me. There was no way out. The evidence was forged. The witness, my husband, was bought off, and I would be forcibly locked in a mental institution. Everyone was certain I would lose. It was at this moment, at the peak of tension, that a quiet chuckle slipping from my lips made the men stop. What's so funny? Derek frowned suspiciously. I slowly brushed back my disheveled bangs and looked him straight in the eyes. Derek, you really are smart and very meticulous, but you made one fatal mistake. A mistake? Don't make things up. Do you think I hired Sam just to protect myself physically? Why did I not immediately report Jared or Bob to the police, but specifically waited for your call and even stalled for time until you arrived at this house? Think about it yourself. Hearing my words, a slight alarm flashed across Derek's face for the first time. When I said that, Derek's phone in his jacket pocket began to ring wildly. At the exact same time, Bob's phone, lying on the floor, also vibrated violently, as if the jaws of a giant invisible trap had snapped shut around them simultaneously. What have you done, sister? Derek pulled out his phone, and when he saw the screen, the color instantly drained from his healthy face. My silence was not caused by fear or despair. I was simply waiting for the final piece of the puzzle to fall into place, to drag them all into a hell from which there is no escape. Looking at the screen of his blasting phone, Derek's face became deathly pale. Meanwhile, Bob, who had picked up his phone from the floor, also grew numb looking at the screen and let out a strangled sound. Yes. Hello, this is Derek. With a trembling hand, Derek pressed the answer button. From the other end of the line, the angry voice of an older man rang out. Derek, where are you right now? What on earth are you doing? You, uncle, why are you calling so late? The caller was the second-in-command at Vance Horizon Holdings, my father's right-hand man, my father's younger brother. I slowly walked over to my paled half-brother and said quietly, Let me tell you, the video and audio from the security cameras that Jared just smashed weren't sent to a security company. They were broadcast live to a large screen in the boardroom of the board of directors of Vance Horizon Holdings, who gathered tonight for an emergency meeting to discuss father's condition. A live broadcast. Derek's phone slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a dry thud. My previous order to Sam wasn't just to record, but to hack into the boardroom system and forcefully show them the tragedy unfolding in this dining room. All your crude words about our father's dementia, the fake medical report, your plans to destroy me. The board of directors heard every single word of it, the exact people you wanted to hide it from the most. Power becomes most vulnerable exactly at the moment it is used. A person who feels absolute power loses their basic vigilance regarding who is listening to their words. The sight of my half-brother, who felt like he was suffocating someone else when he was actually destroying the ground beneath his own feet. How hilarious it was. It can't be. The board of directors. Next to him, Bob stared at his phone screen with bulging eyes, shaking violently. He had received an emergency email from the HR department of Apex Solutions. The CEO of Apex Solutions was also present at that meeting. The fact that a department director participated in a malicious conspiracy to frame the daughter of the chairman of a partner company and even tried to make her look insane. As soon as the CEO found out about this in real time, it was clear that Bob would be thrown out onto the street immediately. Catherine, what is this? I'm fired. It can't be. You know how much I've done for the company? Bob wept bitterly, crawling across the floor, trying to hug my legs. I beg you, tell your father to cancel my termination. I only have this job. If I lose it, my life is over. The mouth that a few minutes ago said he would testify about my insanity and sold me out was now whining to protect his job. I coldly pushed away his hands, trying to grab me. Whatever happens to your life, it's no longer my business. For 20 years, I supported such a lowly man. The feeling of emptiness from the lost years enveloped me, and at the same time, any attachment to this hollow man completely vanished. As soon as the thin layer of polish called a job title peeled off, all that was left was a pathetic and empty middle-aged man. Don't joke like that, sister. Suddenly, Derek, backed into a corner on the edge of despair, roared like a wild beast. His common sense completely disappeared. His eyes reddened and emitted a strange light. A person who has lost everything is capable of reckless actions without thinking about the consequences. Hey, you two, kill this woman. If we finish her off here and burn this house down, the evidence will disappear. I'm finished anyway, but I'm taking this woman to the grave with me. Derek yelled at the two large bodyguards behind him. Sam was still holding Jared and couldn't protect me. A critical moment where I should have been prepared to die. However, the bodyguards simply stood silently, not moving an inch. What are you doing? Do it now, Derek yelled. One of the bodyguards slowly removed his earpiece and answered in an even voice. We refuse, Mr. Derek. What? I hired you. Our contract is with Vance Horizon Holdings, not with you personally. We just received a direct order from Mr. C's. Vance himself. If we lay a single finger on his daughter, he will hunt us down to the ends of the earth. Hearing these words, Derek froze as if struck by lightning. The pawns he considered his own turned out to be merely puppets dancing on the palm of his father and mine. From Mr. Vance himself? But Dad is unconscious in a hospital bed. That's right. I've known for a long time that you bribed the hospital staff to slip poison into Dad's four, I said, revealing the cruel truth. Dad isn't in a coma. It was all a trap to draw out your true nature and expel you from the family completely. Perfect encirclement. Not a single ally, power, and position stripped away. Derek slumped helplessly to the floor. Bob stared into the void. Alyssa and Jared only trembled. My absolute victory. Everyone was sure of it. But amidst the silence, Derek's strange laugh suddenly began to sound quietly. Looking at my half-brother laughing like a madman, I frowned slightly. You think you trapped me? Not bad, sister, but I'm not an idiot. I calculated the probability that Dad was just pretending to be asleep. Derek stood up and looked at me with eyes full of madness. Sister, your only child is Mia, right? She turns 20 this year. Do you know where she is right now? Hearing that name, my heart pounded wildly. My beloved daughter with Bob, Mia, who was supposed to be studying abroad. What happened to her? For the first time, my voice trembled slightly. Don't worry. My guys from the underworld are probably meeting my sweet niece at JFK Airport right now. Derek smiled wickedly, like a devil. Take the inheritance and the company. But if you value your daughter's life, call the board of directors immediately and tell them all of this was just a figment of your imagination. How about that? An endless, sinister threat was again trying to push me to the edge of a deep abyss. Despair. What are you going to do to Mia? Hearing my strained voice, Derek laughed with satisfaction. Relax. I haven't touched her yet. But my mercenaries have already detained Mia at the airport. One phone call from me, and you know what will happen to the girl. Yes. Derek's threat once again made the air in the room freeze. He had anticipated that I would go to any lengths to protect myself. And in return, Derek had prepared the most devious insurance policy. Having found out the flight information of Mia returning from abroad, he ambushed her at the airport. A truly flawless plan. Hurry up and call the board of directors. Say it's all the delusions of your paranoia. Cry and scream. If you do that, at least I'll spare your daughter's life, Derek barked, handing me his phone. At that moment, an unthinkable voice rang out next to me. Kathy, hurry up and do what Derek says. This voice belonged to my husband Bob, who was still sitting on the floor. He yelled at me in a panic with a reddened face. If you act stubborn, Mia could be killed. Apologize quickly. And while you're at it, ask the board to cancel my firing. If we cooperate with Derek, my job can still be saved. His own daughter's life was in the hands of thugs. But in this man's head, there was no worry for his daughter, only saving himself and his position. The moment when the illusion called family finally shattered into pieces. The fact that there are blood ties turned out to be merely a disgusting curse if they are not backed by a heart. Bob, do you even understand how sick your words are as a father? I asked coldly. Bob immediately grew angry. You're the sick one. If you had just stayed quiet and listened to me, none of this would have happened. And because of your antics, my life and Mia's life are ruined. Shifting the blame onto others and relying on the strong, this was how lowly the man I once loved turned out to be. I even hated my own eyes that had once looked at him with love. But such regrets were now just a minor nuisance. Derek laughed like a maniac, handling his phone. Enough of these touching family dramas. Now I'll show you what true despair is. I'll make a video call to my guys, and you'll see Mia's face when she cries and screams. Derek tapped the screen, and it started ringing. Seeing my silence, Derek must have felt his absolute victory. A woman whose child is taken hostage won't be able to do anything. This superficial thought brought a repulsive smile to his face, but he didn't know that a creature called a mother, protecting her child, will turn into a terrifying monster who dares to challenge even the devil from hell. After a few rings, the video call connected. Oh, finally connected. Derek, you were right. A heavy male voice came from the phone's speaker. Great job. So, is the princess behaving nicely? Derek smirked and turned the screen toward me. There you go, sister. Look closely, your sweet daughter. Looking at the screen, Derek's words caught in his throat, and his face turned to stone. Bob and I were also glued to the sight on the screen. There was no figure of Mia crying in fear. In some dimly lit warehouse space, several burly men lay on the floor, bleeding and writhing in pain. And right in the center stood an older man holding a phone. Dad? Why are you there? Derek yelled in a trembling voice. On the other side of the screen was the chairman of Vance Horizon Holdings, my father, Nicholas Vance, who was supposed to be lying unconscious in a hospital bed. My father glared piercingly at Derek through the screen and spoke in a low, commanding voice. Stupid boy. Catherine anticipated long ago that you would target Mia. I sent my personal security team to the airport and apprehended these thugs. No, it can't be. My plan failed from the very beginning. Uncle, you really aren't very bright. An irritated voice rang out from behind my father. From behind him appeared my beloved daughter Mia. She didn't look scared at all. On the contrary, she looked down with an icy stare at one of the men lying at her feet. Mia, are you okay? I asked with relief. Mia smiled brightly through the screen. Yes, Mom, I got into Grandpa's car just like you told me to. So everything is perfectly fine. What about you? Are the weird bugs bothering you? Are you okay? Yes, Mom is fine. I was just about to clean out these weird bugs, I answered calmly, and then slowly turned to Derek and Bob, who were frozen in despair. The hostage plan, which was supposed to be their final trump card, had backfired on them. From Derek's phone, my father's anger-filled voice rang out relentlessly. Derek, not only did you betray me, but you also tried to harm my precious granddaughter. I have no more reason to let you live as a member of the Vance family. You're prepared for the consequences, right? No, Dad. It's a misunderstanding. Derek desperately tried to make excuses to the phone, but my father ruthlessly cut the connection. Silence took over the room. Derek backed away until he hit the wall. I walked up to him and uttered just one cold phrase. Well, Derek, and you too, Bob? The fake scenario you prepared is over. From this moment on, you will experience the real finale of the story, written by me. The two men, completely stripped of any escape routes, looked at me with faces full of terror. The drums of the retaliatory war had already struck, the hell they wanted to send me to. Now it was their turn to experience it to the bone. A pitiful groan echoed in the quiet dining room. Alyssa, who was on the verge of losing consciousness due to the drug's effects, finally began to come to her senses. However, what awaited her when she opened her eyes was not the brilliant future with the successful conquest of someone else's husband that she had dreamed of, but a scene that truly resembled hell. Disheveled hair, smeared makeup, and the shameful acts she had demonstrated in front of the man she wanted to poison. With trembling hands, Alyssa tried to adjust her crumpled clothes. But when she noticed the cameras mounted in the corners of the room and my icy gaze fixed on her, she screamed and covered her face with her hands. Catherine, it's not what you think. Bob forced me. The first word that flew from her lips was the betrayal of the man with whom she had been whispering words of love just yesterday. A person who cannot face their sins when backed into a corner immediately discards the concept of pride and uses their partner as a shield. Looking at this scene, I became even more convinced. Relationships built on lies collapse as easily as a sandcastle under the light of truth. Don't make things up, Alyssa. You're the one who seduced me. You're the one who said we would split the money, Bob immediately replied. Catherine, I was tricked. Believe me, she gave me this drug herself. Two people who once shared a bed and vows of love were now baring their teeth like wild beasts, dragged into a disgusting altercation with mutual accusations. Watching this pathetic scene, I didn't even feel anger. Only a deep emptiness spread in my chest from the realization of how insignificant the man was to whom I had dedicated half my life. A person can become strong when they lose something. But a person who has nothing to protect, neither pride nor principles, can fall to the very bottom. You're both acting disgustingly. Sam's cold voice interrupted their shouting. Miss Alyssa, the bank statements from the offshore accounts you hid in the Cayman Islands, as well as the logs of your text messages with Jared about plans to conquer Mr. Bob and take all his assets. We've already seized all of it. Mr. Bob, the evidence that you used company funds for personal purposes, paying for dates in luxury hotels with Miss Alyssa, we've also already handed over to the HR department. Their movements froze. Alyssa turned pale, and Bob fell to his knees, slamming his fist on the floor. Those who were intoxicated by the childish drug trap they had set themselves ended up in a giant legal net from which there was no escape. People who mistook their cunning for genius strategy were destroyed by true intellect and the power of capital. It was an inevitable and cruel end. And what about you, Derek? I shifted my gaze to my half-brother, pinned against the wall. He was still staring at his phone screen in disbelief. After the failure of the hostage plan at the airport and the realization that his father was alive, he shouldn't have a single card left. But Derek's eyes had not yet dimmed. Sister, yes, I lost. Dad is alive. Mia is saved too. But you won't walk away without losses either. Derek smiled strangely, continuing to tap on his phone with trembling fingers. If that live broadcast reached the board of directors, great. If they see the file I'm about to upload, Dad and the directors will have no choice but to expel you from the Vance family. A file? What do you mean? The true reason you left home 20 years ago, sister? Proof that you tried to sell our family's secret corporate information to a competitor for the man you loved. Hearing these words, old memories surfaced in my mind. The real reason for my fallout with my father 20 years ago, which caused me to run away from home. It was a devious trap set by my then stepmother, who took advantage of my youth and naivety. I was accused of a crime I never committed. I lost my father's trust and ran away, choosing a life with Bob. You want to use that fake again? Fake or not, it doesn't matter. Imagine what will happen if Dad, in his current state, is confronted with such a shocking fact. And imagine how the board of directors, who are terrified of the Vance family image being tarnished, will react to this. Derek smiled insanely and placed his finger over the send button. He intended to drag me down to the bottom with him. Family, pride, blood ties, everything shattered to pieces before his twisted thirst for monopoly. But I didn't flinch. On the contrary, I looked at the final battle of my miserable half-brother with pity. Derek, you really have never seen the true face of your family. What the hell are you talking about? You don't need to upload that file anymore, because the truth about the events from 20 years ago has been in Dad's hands for a long time. Instantly, my father's voice echoed in the room from the speaker again. But not angry like before, but the voice of a father full of deep sorrow and regret. Derek, I've kept the confession letter your mother left before she died for a long time. I know you framed your sister. I also know the incident 20 years ago was fabricated. I was just waiting for you to admit your mistakes yourself and return to the family. Hearing our father's words, Derek's face turned to stone. The finger hovering over the send button trembled violently. The trump card he thought was his had long since lost its power. Why, Dad? Why did you stay silent all this time? Because I loved you. But I sinned by raising a monster who dared to even gamble with his niece's life. A heavy silence descended on the room. Outside, the sounds of several police car sirens began to approach. Alyssa cried bitterly. Bob stared blankly at the ceiling. Derek dropped his phone and slumped helplessly, like a puppet with its strings cut. All the lies were stripped away. Only the naked truth remained in the room. But my heart was too tired to revel in the wine of victory. What awaited at the end of betrayal and hatred was not the restoration of family ties, but the cold fact that these ties were completely severed and beyond repair. But the story wasn't over yet. As the blue light of the approaching police flashers began to illuminate the windows, the doorbell rang again. Police! Open the door! Hearing this voice, Bob suddenly jumped up and yelled, Wait, officers, help me! My wife! My wife has gone crazy and wants to kill me. A pathetic last resistance on the edge of the abyss. However, as if in response to Bob's words, when the door opened, it was not just the police who entered. Sam, standing behind me, met the entrance with a piercing gaze. We've been expecting you. Here's another truth to this case. A middle-aged man with a lawyer's badge on his chest walked in, and along with him came someone unexpected. Seeing this person, Bob and Alyssa's faces filled with despair. From behind the police officers emerged an elegant woman in a strict business suit. When this woman entered the room, Bob's voice, which had just been screaming that his wife was going to kill him, abruptly cut off as if someone had choked him. Mrs. Sterling. From Bob's lips came the name of the wife of the CEO of Apex Solutions, his workplace, and next to her stood another young woman with a cold gaze. Seeing this young woman, Alyssa trembled as if she had seen a ghost and backed away in terror. "Long time no see, Mr. Bob. I didn't expect us to meet again in such a place and under such pathetic circumstances," Eleanor Sterling said in a calm but firm voice. She didn't even glance at Bob spread out on the floor and calmly stood next to me. A person is completely destroyed when they realize that what they thought they were protecting was actually given to them only out of the mercy of others. Bob believed that his position at Apex Solutions was the result of his own hard work and despised me as a stupid housewife who understood nothing. But he didn't know that Eleanor Sterling and I had built a deep relationship of trust through years of joint charity work. And behind his promotion was not only the shadow of my father, but also my own subtle lobbying as his wife. When Catherine told me this story, I couldn't believe it. It's unbelievable that a senior director in our company would commit such a low betrayal. My husband is furious. Firing isn't enough. He's considering criminal prosecution for the embezzlement of funds. Hearing the sentence from Eleanor Sterling, Bob's face turned as white as paper. "No, it can't be, Mrs. Sterling. This is a misunderstanding. This is all the doing of this woman, Alyssa." Disgusting, Bob. The young woman who had arrived with Eleanor stepped forward, walked up to Alyssa, and forcefully slapped her. A ringing slap. "What are you doing? Don't pretend you forgot, Alyssa. 3 years ago, at another company, you did the exact same thing. Seduced the boss, drove his wife to a suicide attempt. I'm the daughter of your victim back then." Alyssa's face turned pale. The shards of her past, the hidden victims, now resurfaced as reality and attacked her. The payback for her actions, the pleasure of destroying other people's families for sport, came in the cruelest form precisely when she had already forgotten about it. Karma is not a superstition. The evil a person accumulates eventually becomes the chain that chokes their own neck. Catherine contacted me as soon as you started getting close to Mr. Bob. We checked your past so that the same tragedy wouldn't happen again. You might have planned to poison and destroy Catherine today, but in reality, your every step has been recorded for the past month. Alyssa collapsed to the floor, crying hysterically and scratching at her throat. Her main weapon, her youth and cunning, proved useless against those who knew the truth. Her brilliant future, which was supposed to be so bright, was now tightly shut. She would remain nothing but a pathetic criminal. Meanwhile, Derek, backed into a corner, merely observed the situation coldly. "I don't care what happens to employees or mistresses. Sister, even if you call the cops, I'm not guilty. There is no proof that I ordered the drugs or tried to orchestrate a kidnapping, a trespassing fine at most." Derek adjusted his jacket and laughed victoriously. But behind me, Sam pulled out an audio recording. "Mr. Derek, you forgot what you just said with your own lips. If we finish her off here and burn this house down, the evidence will disappear. That is solid evidence for a charge of attempted murder and arson." Moreover, one of the entering police officers walked up to Derek and pulled out handcuffs. "Derek Vance, there's a warrant for your arrest on other charges. Suspicion of tax evasion and possession of controlled substances through your connections with the criminal underworld. The man named Jared has already confessed to everything." "What? Jared betrayed me?" Derek's satisfied smile vanished instantly. He was betrayed by the man he considered a disposable pawn. For someone who prides himself on his power and treats people like chess pieces, there was no greater humiliation than this. He who always believed he could only trust himself was ultimately destroyed by his own carelessness. It was the inevitable end for a man who discarded family ties for his own greed. Derek, Bob, Alyssa, and Jared were led away by the police officers one by one. Until the very end, Bob continued to yell shamefully, "Kathy, help me, you still love me, right?" Hearing that voice, I mentally reflected on the meaning of the word love that we once uttered. Love isn't about using your partner. Love is a prayer to compensate for each other's flaws and grow together. But to the man in front of me, love was merely a tool to satisfy his ego. The one he sought was not me, but a convenient shadow that would always support him. And when this shadow took real form and fought back, only then did he realize how fragile the sand foundation he stood on was. In the quiet dining room, only Eleanor Sterling, the young woman who had avenged her mother, and I remained. Shards of plates, spilled powder, and the ruins of a destroyed family. The morning light began to break through the windows, ruthlessly illuminating the chaos in the room. "It's all over, right?" Eleanor said, gently hugging my shoulders. "Yes, it's all over." I looked at the still cold morning air outside the window. I felt the heavy burden on my heart disappearing like the morning mist. But there was no joy in victory. Only a strange silence, as if I had just woken up from a long nightmare. Mrs. Catherine, I need to tell you something. Sam approached me with some hesitation. In his hand was an envelope found in the pocket of the jacket Bob had taken off. When I checked the contents of this envelope, my breath stopped. It contained evidence of Bob's final betrayal, which he had hidden from both me and Derek. My battle wasn't over yet. At the bottom of hell, it turned out, there was an even deeper bottom. The blood seemed to drain from my fingertips. I read the contents of the envelope Sam gave me over and over again, but it was hard for me to believe the reality written there. The paper I held in my trembling hands rustled dryly. It was a life insurance policy for a huge amount, where the insured person was me. Furthermore, there was a special clause. If death occurs as a result of an accident, the payout amount will be doubled. And the beneficiary of the insurance money was not me, nor my daughter Mia. Beneficiary, Natalie Miller. Who was this woman? Not Alyssa, but a third woman I didn't know. Moreover, a family photograph was hidden in the envelope. It depicted Bob, smiling happier than I had ever known him to. Next to him was a soft-looking woman named Natalie and a boy of about 10, looking very much like him. It can't be. A dry chuckle escaped my lips. The man I had believed in for 20 years, who I thought worked hard for me and Mia. The man who achieved success with the help of my family and locked me in the role of a lonely housewife. It turns out, somewhere else I didn't know about, he had built another family 15 years ago. The word betrayal was too soft here. This was the act of a devil that negated my entire life to its very roots. While married to me, he used the last name Miller, lived with another woman, and raised a son, just like Mia, who was born to us. Looking at his peaceful expression in the photo, it seemed he valued that place more than his life with me. How could a person lead such a double life so perfectly? In the morning, kissing me and saying, "I'm off to work," he would leave for his other home, confessing his love to another wife and child. And to end his relationship with me, he didn't just want to incapacitate me, he wanted me dead. He used a stupid woman named Alyssa to drug me. And, ultimately, he planned to kill me in a staged accident. That way, he could inherit part of the wealth of Vance Horizon Holdings, get the massive insurance money, and return to his real family. "Bob, stop." I yelled more sharply than ever at the back of Bob, who was just being led away by the police. Because of the volume of my voice, the police officers also stopped. Bob slowly turned around. His face, which had just been begging for mercy, had now changed to an empty, cold, and frightening expression, as if he had already accepted his fate. "You found it? Huh? That Sam really is good. What does this mean? Who is Natalie Miller? That child is your son." I held out the photo with trembling hands. Bob smirked cynically. "That's right. My real wife and child. 20 years with you, Kathy, was just a job to me." That single phrase destroyed the last remnants of feelings that were still in my heart. 20 years of time that I spent cooking for him, ironing his shirts, suppressing myself so he could focus on work. To him, it was just a job for a paycheck. When I realized that the memories of love were just poison covered in lies, I felt violently nauseous. "You always hid behind the Vance name and looked down on me. Your father's help. It made me sick. Everything you did out of good intentions only tortured me and destroyed my pride." Bob broke free from the police officer's grip, walked up to me, and spat words of curses. "The one I truly loved wasn't some rich heiress like you, but Natalie, who loved me as a normal man. My plan was to take everything from you that could be taken. And in the end, when you disappeared, we would live happily ever after. So you tried to kill me. Not kill, but free you from the pressure of the Vance family. That Alyssa was just a disposable pawn. I never thought that stupid woman would succeed. But my plan to stage an accident while you were confused was going smoothly. What a pity. There was only one step left." Bob's eyes no longer radiated humanity. There was only irritation that his goal had not been achieved and a deep hatred for me. The fact that the man I shared a bed with for 20 years and raised a daughter with turned out to be a monster who only thought about how to kill me for money simply left me speechless. I used to think silence was golden, but behind this silence, he programmed my death. Wearing a mask called care, he waited patiently for 15 years to plunge a knife into my throat. "Take him away." The police officers grabbed Bob's arms and pushed him toward the patrol car. Until the very end, Bob continued to glare piercingly at me with a crooked smile, as if saying, "I'll be back. Catherine, are you okay?" Eleanor Sterling ran up and supported me by the shoulders. I held up my body, ready to collapse, with all my might, and then forcefully tore the family photo in my hands. The morning light broke through the tear in the ripped photo. "Yes, I'm okay. Now I really see everything." My voice sounded very cold. I surprised myself. The fact that he tried to kill me no longer caused sadness, but awakened my cold side as a woman from the Vance family. A double life for 15 years, a murder plan for insurance, and the real family he tried to protect. If he wanted to send me to hell, I had to show him a hell even deeper. Sam, please immediately track the whereabouts of this woman named Natalie Miller and her child, I told Sam. I'm not going to take away from him what he wanted to protect the most. I'm just going to show them how they will receive all the evil he committed from the best seats in the audience. Revenge is not over yet. Simply handing my husband over to the police isn't enough to pay for 20 years of my life. I must destroy the fake paradise he loved so much down to its very roots. This is the final and greatest payback for the man who played with my life. Outside the window, it was completely dawn, illuminating the city. But in my heart, the black flame of relief burned quietly and fiercely. The paradise that my husband guarded for 15 years was located in a quiet suburban neighborhood about an hour's drive from my house. An ordinary old but well-kept apartment building. A child's bicycle stood on the balcony, and in the window, curtains in warm tones, symbolizing family comfort, fluttered in the wind. From the passenger seat of Sam's car, I looked at this scenery, feeling a burning in my chest. While I was economizing, chasing grocery store sales, and cooking simple meals for the sake of my husband's health, he was here, under a different name, laughing together with another family. On those nights when I was lonely, as if I were raising Mia alone, he was here hugging his son, who was his exact copy. The weight of betrayal is proportional to its duration. 15 years is more than enough time to completely change a person. Catherine, are you ready? Sam asked quietly next to me. I took a deep breath, suppressing the storm in my soul with steel resolve. Yes, I wanted to see with my own eyes the embodiment of happiness for which he risked his life. Stepping out of the car, the sound of my footsteps climbing the stairs of the building seemed very loud. On the door of apartment 203, only the name Miller was written. The freedom I had supposedly given up to escape the pressure of the Vance family, as it turned out, had been gifted by him to another woman in a place I knew nothing about. With a trembling finger, I pressed the doorbell. Yes, just a minute. A woman's voice came from inside. It was calmer than in the family photo from 15 years ago, but it sounded a bit flirtatious and sweet. The door opened. There stood a woman with a soft appearance wearing an apron, Natalie Miller. She didn't have the flashy charm of Alyssa, but she possessed a fragile and gentle aura that somehow attracted a man's desire to protect her. The image of a vulnerable woman that a woman like me, living with a straight back and carrying the burden of a surname, could never copy. Excuse me, are you looking for someone? Natalie tilted her head in confusion, looking at me. Let me introduce myself. I'm Catherine, Bob's wife. When I uttered these words, the soft smile on her face vanished instantly. The trash bag she was holding fell helplessly to the floor. Ah, that was all she could say. Then she froze, like a frog in front of a snake. Shock, fear, and somehow an expression of submission to fate, as if what was supposed to happen had finally happened. A mistress always has two faces. The joy of having taken away, and the anxiety like walking on thin ice, fearing that one day it will be taken back. She, too, had lived all these 15 years pretending not to know about my existence, playing the role of a happy wife. Mom, who is it? From deep inside the apartment, a boy appeared, looking very much like Bob. Natalie panicked, hid the child behind her back, and tried to chase me away with a trembling voice. Please leave. Bob is on a business trip. A business trip? Oh yes. Right now he's just preparing for a business trip that will never end to a place called the county jail. I gently moved her aside and walked inside. The furnishings in the apartment were very ordinary. The air carried the aroma of homemade pot roast, Bob's favorite dish. Drawings by her son hung on the walls. The expensive watch I bought for him lay carelessly on a shelf. Lady, don't just walk in. Bob and I live happily. I heard from him. You're the one who tortured him, bound him with the power of the Vance family, and trampled on his pride, Natalie yelled. Her eyes radiated the light of a person confident in their righteousness. Bob in her eyes played the role of a tragic hero oppressed by a cruel rich wife to justify his infidelity. Easily making his wife the villain, he told a story that made the new woman who loved him feel maximum pity. I wasn't even sickened by this hypocrisy. I just laughed dryly, seeing how ridiculous it all was. Tortured him? Oh, perhaps. But you know, his success, your living money, all this is taken from the Vance family's money. Here. I pulled the insurance policy and a copy of Bob's arrest warrant from my bag and threw them on the table. Look at this and tell me what he tried to do to protect you. Natalie read the documents with trembling hands. The murder plot, the insurance fraud, and the fact that after my elimination, a huge amount of money would be transferred to her and her son. It can't be. Bob is such a good man. Behind such kindness always hides poison. He tried to kill me to protect you. And his other mistress, named Alyssa, who was involved in this plan, confessed to everything tonight. Who's Mistress? Natalie's face became increasingly filled with despair. Didn't you know? Bob was not only with you, but also had a deep relationship with a young woman. To him, you were a place to rest. Alyssa was a place for passion, and I was a source of money. He didn't love any of us. He viewed us merely as functions to satisfy his own desires. The love she believed in turned out to be just part of a multi-layered lie. Natalie sank helplessly into a chair and wept bitterly. The illusion that lasted 15 years, that only she understood Bob, shattered to pieces. People want to feel special, but the cruel truth is that for an unfaithful person, a replacement can always be found. At that moment, Sam's voice rang out sharply behind me. Catherine, look at this. This is no ordinary apartment. Sam pointed to a sturdy safe in a room that apparently served as Bob's home office, and around which were scattered internal documents with the Vance Horizon Holdings logo. The secret family information Derek had spoken of. Bob had not only stolen it 20 years ago. Yes. I picked up the documents, and a chill ran down my spine. Bob had not only planned to kill me for the insurance payouts, but had also spent years building a ticking time bomb in this house to destroy Vance Horizon Holdings itself. Did he choose Natalie because she was submissive and wouldn't suspect his criminal activities, serving as the perfect cover? Bob, what were you making me do all this time? Natalie whispered in a hoarse voice. It turns out, at Bob's request, she periodically delivered some documents to other places. She thought she was helping the man she loved, but in reality, she was being used as an accomplice in the destruction of an entire corporate empire. Natalie, you won't get away with this either, I said cruelly. What you delivered are crucial pieces of evidence related to the sale of secret corporate information. The police will be here soon. From below the building, the sounds of approaching sirens could be heard again. Natalie panicked and frantically began digging around the room. I have to hide it, Bob said. If anything happens, look under this floor. She threw back the rug in the living room and opened a hidden floorboard. But what appeared from there was not just cash or documents. Seeing this, Sam and I held our breath. There lay Bob's final and most terrifying trap to destroy me, Alyssa, and Natalie simultaneously. This man never intended to save anyone from the very beginning. Sam's tone echoed hollowly in the room, which began to plunge into darkness. The bottom of hell, it turned out, was not yet visible. From under the floor cache, neatly stacked suitcases emerged. A tag was attached to each of them, like a letter addressed to someone, for Catherine, for Alyssa, and for Natalie. With trembling hands, Natalie opened the suitcase addressed to her. Inside was a stack of fake passports and offshore bank statements in her name, and on the very top lay a handwritten confession by Bob. Its contents were a perfectly fabricated scenario, claiming that Natalie had voluntarily stolen the secret information of Vance Horizon Holdings and blackmailed Bob, forcing him to cooperate. I threatened Bob? A lie! I was just delivering things on his orders. Natalie screamed and cried bitterly on the floor. The actions she considered proof of love turned out to be the process of creating irrefutable evidence to make her the scapegoat. A person would never think that the one who they believed loved them was actually preparing them as a sacrifice. Blind love is sometimes sharper than a knife. It slits your own throat. Bob used Natalie's submissiveness, and if his plans were ever exposed, he prepared a way to pin all the blame on her, while he himself could escape. Sam, check that suitcase too. I suppressed the trembling in my voice and opened the suitcase labeled for Catherine. Inside lay a stack of forged diaries that proved I suffered from a severe mental disorder and intended to murder my husband Bob. The handwriting was very similar to mine, almost indistinguishable. There was even fake video data in which I supposedly tried to slip poison into Bob's food. This man already calculated that you would start acting to protect yourself, Catherine, Sam muttered bitterly. Bob's goal was clear. When I tried to hold him accountable, he would throw out this evidence and make everyone consider my claims the ravings of a madwoman. Lock his wife in a psych ward, pin the blame on the mistress, and he himself would receive the inheritance and insurance money as the victimized husband. For 15 years, he had been setting our lives up like chess pieces, preparing his final move. Listening to Sam's explanation of the contents of Alyssa's suitcase, I finally laughed. When anger and sadness reach their limit, all a person has left is a dry laugh. Alyssa's suitcase contained evidence that she was the main organizer of Bob's embezzlement and had used Jared to try to kill me. Bob had already anticipated that Alyssa would betray him and conspire with Derek. He deliberately showed her his weakness, allowed her to commit a crime, and kept the evidence here. When Alyssa tried to destroy him, all he had to do was hand this suitcase over to the police, and Alyssa would never get out of prison for the rest of her days. 3 women were handed roles. For each, a scenario for her destruction was prepared, and everything was organized so that no matter who won, he wouldn't lose. A perfect trap. He didn't love us. He just prepared 3 wrong answers to protect the one and only correct one, himself. And he was ready to throw us away at any moment. Catherine, look at this. At the bottom of the suitcase, a voice recorder. Sam found a small recording device. When the play button was pressed, Bob's familiar low voice echoed through the quiet room. If you're listening to this recording, it means I have already been arrested. Or, perhaps, I'm no longer in this world. Kathy, Natalie, Alyssa, right now you are probably in the abyss of despair and cursing me, but you're wrong. You said you loved me, but in the end, you were only forcing your desires on me. The voice from the speaker was very cold and showed not the slightest hint of guilt. Catherine trying to control me however she pleased, hiding behind the big name of the Vances. Natalie, seeking protection in me, and considering herself the most special. Alyssa, trying to possess me with her youth and charm for the sake of money. You're all the same. You only saw me as a convenient man for yourselves. Every word from the speaker froze my heart. He twisted our love, presenting it as a form of domination, and justified his betrayal as self-defense. A man who shifted his inner emptiness onto others and could only affirm his existence by destroying other people's lives. Seeing how evil his soul was, for the first time I felt true fear toward him. What a pity. You thought you'd send me to hell, but you're going there with me. If the evidence from this apartment falls into the hands of the police, your lives will also be over. Goodbye, my beloved women. See you at the bottom of hell. The recording stopped. The approaching sirens were heard again in the room. Natalie panicked and desperately dumped the contents of the suitcase onto the floor. No, I didn't do anything. Bob, help me. Natalie, calm down. I firmly grabbed her shoulders and looked her straight in the eyes. He intended to drag us all down with him, but we'll prove to him that he miscalculated. Miscalculated? Yes. He believed that we would hate each other and fight to the bitter end. But I'm not going to participate in such a cheap scenario, I signaled to Sam. He nodded silently and looked out the window. The police had already surrounded the building, and the footsteps of investigators climbing the stairs could be heard. Catherine, what will you do if they find this evidence? And you too. Sam, remember the source of my father's secret information that Derek had? I said in a cold voice. Bob sold the information to Derek, but who can guarantee that this information was authentic? At that moment, certainty arose in my mind. Bob hid not only the evidence to destroy 3 women, he planned to hand over Vance Horizon Holdings itself to another major power, and Derek was merely a pawn of that power. There was a loud knock on the door. Police, open up! I squeezed Natalie's hand tightly and decided to go for the final, biggest bet. Natalie, I don't want your son to become the child of a murderer, but for this, you must give up the identity of Natalie Miller that you have lived all this time. Natalie wiped her tears and, although she was trembling, looked into my eyes and nodded. I never imagined life without Bob, but to protect my son, I'll do whatever it takes. I've seen many times moments when love turns into poison, but the resolve to keep living even after swallowing the poison possesses incredible power. I turned to the door and greeted the police with a loud voice. This story rejects the finale of mutual destruction written by Bob, and instead moves in a completely unexpected direction. His greatest mistake was that the women he considered disposable pawns didn't destroy each other, but united to erase him from history. The gates of hell opened, but only 3 women whom he once loved will crawl out from there. In the interrogation room behind iron bars, Bob still smiled cynically. It's all useless. If they see the evidence in that apartment, you will become the criminals, and I will get everything as the victim. He believed that the devious trap he had designed was still working perfectly. But when the door of the interrogation room opened, it was not me in handcuffs who entered, as he imagined. Long time no see, Bob. When I walked in with a confident stride, the expression on Bob's face tensed slightly. Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be taken straight to the madhouse? A pity, isn't it? The fake diaries and edited videos you kept there, all of that I have already handed over to the police, along with the drafts you used to practice forging my handwriting. Bob's eyes widened in disbelief. I told you I've been investigating for a month. I kept the scraps of paper from the trash can where you practiced copying my handwriting and the logs of the computer you used to edit the video. All this thanks to Sam. The evidence he considered his most reliable shield had now turned into an irrefutable death sentence that would bind him in the attempted premeditated murder case. It can't be. What about Natalie? She couldn't have betrayed me. When Bob screamed hysterically, from behind the two-way mirror came the voice of another woman. Bob, you're right. I really did love you. Through the speaker came Natalie's voice, full of sadness. But the one I loved was the Bob Miller who protected me and our son, not the monster who made us victims for the sake of his escape. I told the police everything, the contents of the documents you made me deliver, and about the trap under the floorboards. Natalie, you betrayed me. Who provided for you and your son all this time? Finally, Bob's true nature broke out in the form of insults. A woman with no future like you. I'm the one who picked you up. You should be grateful. Not betraying me, you ungrateful bitch. Silence. Hearing these words, I felt only pity for this man. He could only understand love as property rights or a debt of gratitude. Such an empty and pathetic man, believing he picked up a woman who loved him and demanding payback, ignoring his own betrayal. It was his twisted value system that was the real criminal that brought his life to collapse. Bob, in the end, you're left alone. When I said this quietly, Bob glared fiercely at me like a wild beast. Shut up. Not yet. There is still Derek. Derek is currently tallying up his sins in the next room. From behind the door appeared my father, Nicholas Vance. With his overwhelming authority, he left Bob speechless, forcing him to slide down his chair. The competitor company you tried to sell our family's secret information to, in reality, that's also a front company that I set up. The information you stole was just a fake to lure you into a trap. The bomb you were building for 15 years was never supposed to explode from the very beginning. What? The light of hope completely extinguished on Bob's face. 15 years, half his life. He spent it preparing revenge and a double life. And it all turned out to be just a ridiculous one-man play, acted out on the palm of a giant. The position he wanted to protect, the family he wanted to hide, and the wealth he wanted to seize, everything crumbled in an instant like a sandcastle. Alyssa, Jared, and Derek, everyone involved will get what they deserve. I delivered the final cold blow. Bob, your name today will be completely erased from the Vance family, from Apex Solutions, and from the Miller family you tried to protect. No one will remember you. Your life will end in the status of a despicable criminal. Wait, Kathy, you loved me once too, right? Poor me from 20 years ago. Bob clung to the iron bars, crying and begging for mercy. Not a trace remained of the image of the straightforward young man I once loved. There was only a lump of disgusting obsession trying to survive by selling memories of the past. Yes, I loved you once, but what I loved was an illusion inside you. The real you is this repulsive man in front of me. Without looking back, I left the interrogation room behind. I heard Bob's hysterical screams, but they no longer touched my heart. In the hallway, Natalie was already waiting. She was hugging her son with a tired but somehow relieved expression. Catherine, thank you. I'll start a new life with my son. Yes, stay strong. Two women who were supposed to be enemies, played by one man, ultimately recognized each other's wounds and crawled out of hell together. This is a story of revenge, but at the same time, a true declaration of independence for women waking up from false love. Catherine, you handled it? My father said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Yes, Dad, but I lost too much. You didn't lose it, you cleaned up the filth. From this moment on, live your own life. The morning light broke through the windows of the police station, signaling the end of a long night. But this story has one more, the most satisfying epilogue. What despair will these selfish men experience in prison, and what brilliant future awaits me? The true outcome of the upheaval will become top national news in a month. 1 month later, a month has passed since that stormy day. The season changed, and buds began to confidently bloom on the trees in the park. I now stood in the chairman's office on the top floor of the Vance Horizon Holdings headquarters. Looking at the city landscape filled with the scent of spring, in my hands were the court transcripts that arrived just yesterday and an official report from Apex Solutions. On the television news, they furiously discussed the embezzlement and attempted murder case committed by a senior director of a major corporation every day, as well as the drug possession and tax evasion by the son of a major conglomerate. The men who once ruled my world had now turned into trash, showered with public ridicule and locked behind cold walls. People realize the value of something only after they lose it. But Bob was different. He didn't realize the value of what was lost, but was terrified by the fact that he never really had anything to begin with. The position he desperately clung to, the double life he considered love. All this was merely a sandcastle built on the mercy and lies of others. Mom, the tea is ready. The door opened and Mia entered with a bright smile. She had temporarily paused her studies abroad and started interning alongside me to become the next generation of executives at Vance Horizon Holdings. Thank you, Mia. You look radiant. Yeah, I feel so much freer now than when we lived in that house. And you, Mom, have become so much more beautiful. Hearing Mia's words, I looked at myself in the mirror. There was no longer the image of a fading housewife, always worrying about her husband's mood and tightly clipping coupons. There stood a woman firmly standing on her own feet and dictating her destiny with her own words. It was expected that Bob would be sentenced to 15 years in prison. In addition to attempted murder, there were charges of embezzling a large sum of money and the illegal sale of corporate secrets. The final crushing blow was a farewell letter from Natalie, the woman he called his real family. For the sake of her son, Natalie severed all ties with her past with Bob and started a new life in a quiet little town set up by my father. According to rumors, in prison, Bob pounded the wall every night like a madman, finding out he was abandoned by Natalie, the only person he considered his ally. A person cannot live alone, but relationships built on using and trampling others will disappear in an instant when the storm comes. The sincere love he sought was actually in my silence and devotion. He was the one who destroyed it with his own greed and poisoned it. Meanwhile, Alyssa received a punishment that was more painful to her than death: the social destruction of her persona. Her past sins were spread across social media, and no company wanted to hire her. She, who once manipulated men with her youth and charm, was now needed by no one. She lived in fear of debt in a rundown apartment. The sight of her fading former brilliance is a very tragic end for a person who tried to build her happiness on the suffering of others. Derek was also completely disowned by his father. The Vance last name was taken from him, and all his assets were confiscated. In prison, he kept muttering, "I'm not guilty. It's all Sister Kathy's fault." He who constantly attacked others to protect his pride was ultimately consumed by his own arrogance. "Catherine, the chairman is calling for you." My secretary Sam entered the office. He had completed his work as an investigator and had now become my personal secretary, whose role is to clean out the darkness within Vance Horizon Holdings. "Yes, I'll be right there." "Oh, by the way, Sam, is the procedure for donating all the remaining money from Bob's offshore accounts to the orphanage complete?" "Yes, ma'am. As his only good deed, that money will benefit children in need. He doesn't have a single dollar left." I nodded deeply and left the office. The portraits of previous generations of chairmen hanging on the hallway walls seemed to watch my steps. 20 years ago, I ran away from this home. But now I have turned the pressure of this house into my strength and will create a new history for the Vance family. The most pleasant moment of revenge is not when you exact revenge on the traitor, but when you use the experience of betrayal as a springboard to lift yourself to a much greater height, into a much more brilliant future. I went down to the lobby and stepped into the spring light together with Mia. The clear blue sky stretched endlessly. Perhaps the weather was the same 20 years ago when I met Bob, but that me and the current me are different people. I am no longer anyone's shadow. I will live my own life to protect those I love. The wind blew, scattering apple blossom petals. As if it were a blessing for me, reborn, washing away my dirty past. The story ends here, but my real life is just beginning. Let's go, Mia, to our new future. I squeezed my daughter's hand tightly and walked straight ahead, never looking back again.